لا إله إلا الله سيدنا محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام ميم. ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون. وإلهكم إله واحد لا إله إلا هو الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أقدم إليك بين يدي كل نفس ولمحة ولحظة وخطرة وطرفة يطف بها أهل السماوات والأرض وكل شيء هو في علمك كائن أو قد كان. أقدم إليك بين يدي ذلك كله. الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسي السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم. لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وإن تبدوا ما في أنفسكم وتخفوه يحاسبكم به الله فيغفر لمن يشاء ويعذب من يشاء والله على كل شيء قدير. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كلنا آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت. نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين آمين. شهد الله أنه لا إله إلا هو والملائكة أولو العلم قائما بالقسط لا إله إلا هو العزيز الحكيم. وأنا أشهد بما شهد الله به وأشهد الله على ذلك وأستودع الله هذه الشهادة وهي لي عند الله وديعة أسأل حفظها حتى يتوفاني عليها. إن الدين عند الله الإسلام. قل اللهم مالك الملك اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء إنك على كل شيء قدير. تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب. رحمن الدنيا والآخرة ورحيمهما تعطي من تشاء منهما وتمنع من تشاء. أنت ترحمنا فارحمنا رحمة تغنينا بها عن رحمة من سواك. اللهم اقض عنا الدين واغننا من الفقر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. رحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب نفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم يا عظيم السلطان، يا قديم الإحسان، يا دائم النعم، يا كثير الجود، يا واسع العطاء، يا خفي اللطف، يا جميل الصنع، يا حليما لا يعجل. صل يا رب على سيدنا محمد وآله وسلم، وارض عن الصحابة أجمعين. اللهم لك الحمد شكرا، ولك المن فضلا، وأنت ربنا حقا، ونحن عبيدك رقا، وأنت لن تزل لذلك أهلا. يا ميسر كل عسير، ويا جابر كل كسير، ويا صاحب كل فريد، ويا مغني كل فقير، ويا مقوي كل ضعيف، ويا مأمن كل مخيف. يسر علينا كل عسير، فتيسير العسير عليك يسير. اللهم يا من لا يحتاج إلى البيان والتفسير، حاجاتنا كثير، وأنت عالم بها وخبير. اللهم إني أخاف منك، وأخاف ممن يخاف منك، وأخاف ممن لا يخاف منك. اللهم بحق من يخاف منك نجينا ممن لا يخاف منك. اللهم بحق سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم، حسنا بعينك التي لا تنام، واكلفنا بكنفك الذي لا يرام، وارحمنا بقدرتك علينا فلا نهلك، وانت ثقتنا ورجاؤنا. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم، والحمد لله رب العالمين، عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. اللهم إنا نسألك زيادة في الدين، وبركة في العمر، وصحة في الجسد قبل الموت، وشهادة عند الموت، ومغفرة بعد الموت، وعفوا عند الحساب، وأمانة من العذاب، ونصيبا من الجنة. وارزقنا النظر إلى وجهك الكريم. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان ربك وسلام على المرسلين، والحمد لله رب العالمين، على خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه من ذلك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد، لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد، لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد، لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الفلق، من شر ما خلق، ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب، ومن شر النفاثات في العقد، ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الفلق، من شر ما خلق، ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب، ومن شر النفاثات في العقد، ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الفلق، من شر ما خلق، ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب، ومن شر النفاثات في العقد، ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الناس، ملك الناس، إله الناس، من شر الوسواس الخناس، الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الناس، ملك الناس، إله الناس، من شر الوسواس الخناس، الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الناس، ملك الناس، إله الناس، من شر الوسواس الخناس، الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين، وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون. ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين، وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون. ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين، وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون. أفحسبتم أنما خلقناكم عبثا وأنكم إلينا لا ترجعون. فتعالى الله الملك الحق، لا إله إلا هو رب العرش الكريم. ومن يدع مع الله إلها آخر لا برهان له به، فإنما حسابه عند ربه، إنه لا يفلح الكافرون. وقل رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين. فسبحان الله حين تمسون وحين تصبحون، وله الحمد في السماوات والأرض وعشيا وحين تظهرون. يخرج الحي من الميت، ويخرج الميت من الحي بعد موتها، وكذلك تخرجون. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان. لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله الناس لعلهم يتفكرون. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو، عالم الغيب والشهادة، هو الرحمن الرحيم. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو، الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر، سبحان الله عما يشركون. هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور، له الأسماء الحسنى، يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض، هو العزيز الحكيم. سلام على نوح في العالمين، إنا كذلك نجزي المحسنين، إنه من عبادنا المؤمنين. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. أعوذ بكلمات الله من شر ما خلق. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. اللهم إني أصبحت منك في نعمة وعافية وستر، فأتم نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم إني أصبحت منك في نعمة وعافية وستر، فأتم نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم إني أصبحت منك في نعمة وعافية وستر، فأتم نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك في الدنيا والآخرة. أشهدك وأشهد ملائكة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك، وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك. اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد ملائكة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك، وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك. اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد ملائكة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك، وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك. اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد ملائكة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك، وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافي مزيدا. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافي مزيدا. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافي مزيدا. آمنت بالله العظيم وكفرت بالجبت والطاغوت واستمسكت بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله السميع العليم. العظيم وكفرت بالجبت والطاغوت واستمسكت بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله السميع العليم. آمنت بالله العظيم وكفرت بالجبت والطاغوت واستمسكت بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله السميع العليم. رضيت بالله ربا بالإسلام دينا وسيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم نبيا ورسولا. رضيت بالله ربا بالإسلام دينا وسيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم نبيا ورسولا. رضيت بالله ربا بالإسلام دينا وسيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم نبيا ورسولا. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلته رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلته رب حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلته رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلته رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلته العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلته رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلته رب العرش العظيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل 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 على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. فجاءت الخير وأعوذ بك من فجاءت الشر. اللهم أنت ربي لا إله إلا أنت خلقتني وأنا عبدك وأنا على عهدك ووعدك ما استطعت. أعوذ بك من شر ما صنعت. أبوء لك بنعمتك علي وأبوء بذنبي فاغفر لي فإنه لا يغفر الذنوب إلا أنت. اللهم أنت ربي لا إله إلا أنت عليك توكلت وأنت رب العرش العظيم. ما شاء الله كان وما لم يشأ لم يكن ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. أعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير وأن الله قد أحاط بكل شيء علما. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من شر نفسي ومن شر كل دابة أنت آخذ من ناصيتها يا ربي على صراط مستقيم. يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك أستغيث من عذابك أستجير. شأني كله ولا تكلني إلى نفسي ولا إلى أحد من خلقك طرفة عين. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الهم والحزن وأعوذ بك من العجز والكسل وأعوذ بك من الجبن والبخل وأعوذ بك من غلبة الدين وقهر الرجال. اللهم إني أسألك العافية في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم إني أسألك العفو والعافية والمعافاة الدائمة في ديني ودنياي وأهلي ومالي. اللهم استر عوراتي وامن روعاتي. اللهم احفظني من بين يدي ومن خلفي وعن يميني وعن شمالي من فوقي من تحتي. اللهم أنت خلقتني وأنت تهديني وأنت تطعمني وأنت تسقيني وأنت تميتني وأنت تحييني وأنت على كل شيء قدير. أصبحنا على فطرة الإسلام وعلى كلمة الإخلاص وعلى دين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وعلى ملة أبينا إبراهيم حنيفا مسلما وما كان من المشركين. اللهم بك أصبحنا وبك أمسينا وبك نحيا وبك نموت وعليك نتوكل وإليك نشور. أصبحنا وأصبح الملك لله والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم إني أسألك خير هذا اليوم فتحه ونصره ونوره وبركته وهداه. اللهم إني أسألك خير هذا اليوم وخير ما فيه وخير ما قبله وخير ما بعده. وأعوذ بك من شر هذا اليوم وشر ما فيه وشر ما قبله وشر ما بعده. اللهم ما أصبح بي من نعمة أو بأحد من خلقك فمنك وحدك لا شريك لك، فلك الحمد لك الشكر على ذلك. سبحان الله بحمد عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه من ذلك كلماته. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومدار كلماته. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومدار كلماته. سبحان الله العظيم وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومدار كلماته. سبحان الله العظيم وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومدار كلماته. سبحان الله العظيم وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومدار كلماته. سبحان الله عدد ما خلق في السماء. سبحان الله عدد ما خلق في الأرض. سبحان الله عدد ما هو خالق. الحمد لله عدد ما خلق في السماء. الحمد لله عدد ما خلق في الأرض. الحمد لله عدد ما بين ذلك. الحمد لله عدد ما هو خالق. لا إله إلا الله عدد ما خلق في السماء. لا إله إلا الله عدد ما خلق في الأرض. لا إله إلا الله عدد ما بين ذلك. لا إله إلا الله عدد ما هو خالق. الله أكبر عدد ما خلق في السماء. الله أكبر عدد ما خلق في الأرض. الله أكبر عدد ما بين ذلك. الله أكبر عدد ما هو خالق. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما خلق في السماء. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما خلق في الأرض. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما بين ذلك. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما هو خالق. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له يحيي ويميت على كل شيء قدير عدد كل ذرة ألف مرة. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت على كل شيء قدير عدد كل ذرة ألف مرة. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الحمد يحيي ويميت على كل شيء قدير عدد كل ذرة ألف مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد مفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما في علم الله. صلاة وسلام دائمين بدعاء منك الله عليه وصحبه عدد كل ذرة ألف مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد مفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما في علم الله. صلاة وسلام دائمين بدعاء منك الله وعلى آله وصحبه عدد كل ذرة ألف مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد مفتاح باب رحمة الله صلاة وسلام دائمين بدون منك الله وعلى آله وصحبه على ذكر دار ألف مرة. لحظتنا بدأ عدد خلقه وهو نسيج تعرشين دار كلماته. فاتحة. اللهم يهدي.
You guys want a book to read from? Yeah, which one? No, we didn't.
Because I read last Tuesday.
Yeah, you were the last person I read. Yeah. So we're at the part where he's talking about the bookmark. It's for me, it's 27. وقد تعرض لبعض أهل العلم أوهام. You know where you're at?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم ورضي الله عنكم. Certain doubts may beset scholars, thereby preventing them from calling to the truth and disseminating knowledge. One of them is to think, I do not implement what I know, so how can I teach and invite others to it, when those who would do so are under severe threats, as is well known. To such a person it should be said, to teach knowledge is part of practicing it, and he who teaches without himself practicing it much better than he who neither teaches nor practices. If you cannot do good in its eternity, then at least do some of it. You must teach, and you must strive to practice what you know. Without doubt, threats against he who teaches without practicing what he teaches are even more worthy of applying to him who neither practices nor teaches. For God has imposed two obligations upon those who have knowledge. The first fulfilled one and failed to fulfill the other, while the second failed to fulfill both, thereby becoming more worthy of these threats and more deserving of punishment.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله تعالى على سيدنا محمد أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن الدين وتعلم التعلم تذكر تذكرون الانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تماسك التبرع سنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء والهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومدعاة القلوب لثوابه سبحانه وتعالى سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله أكبر الله قوة عظيم عدد كتاب كتب وكتب بدنا بدين مدى دهرين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وحسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله اللهم إني أعوذ بك من أن نظلم وأظلم أو أجهل عليه اللهم أغني من زين من حلم وأكرمنا بالتقوى وجملنا عافينا مراحمين يا رحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. طيب, so he's talking today about, after speaking about the importance of da'wah and calling to Allah Ta'ala, he's speaking now about certain ideas people might have, people, students of knowledge or scholars, or okay, that can prevent them from calling to Allah Ta'ala or participating in da'wah. And these ideas are ultimately all like fallacies. They're not it's almost like they're deluded into thinking they're not capable of participating in da'wah, okay? But in reality, they still are. The first one he says is someone says, for example, okay, yeah, I've studied, I've learned, I know something about the religion, but I'm not practicing all that myself, so how can I call others to Allah Ta'ala? Okay? So they believe that the reason they shouldn't participate in da'wah is because they're not practicing everything they've learned, okay? Or everything, or some of it, or whatever it may be. Tamam? And they're like, well, a lot of ayahs have come from in the Quran, and a lot of hadith have been narrated about people who call to something, who preach, but don't actually practice. All right? So they say, I'm not worthy of calling to Allah Ta'ala. And this is something that's common. It's quite common amongst people. And the answer to them is that, well, teaching what you've learned is part of practicing it. So when you learn something about the religion, you have two obligations. The first one is to practice it in your own life, and the second one is to call others to it and to teach it to people around you, your family, your community, those who listen. Okay. So if you're someone who has learned, okay, and you don't practice and you don't preach, you've neglected two things that are obligatory upon you: the preaching and the practice. But if you're someone who you preach but you don't practice, you've at least fulfilled one of the two obligations. Okay, you fulfilled the obligation of preaching and teaching it to others, but you've neglected the obligation of practicing in your own life. Now, obviously, this is not to say that it's okay to practice, to preach, or to teach others and not practice it yourself. That's not what we're saying. Okay, we're not saying that's okay. We're saying it's better than someone who's not preaching and not practicing. And all the ayahs and hadith that come and talk about the punishment waiting for those who don't practice what they've learned and teach others, that punishment is also more rightly reserved for those who don't preach and don't practice. Okay? So the person who says, I'm not practicing myself, how can I teach others what I've learned? They're neglecting two things that are obligatory upon them. They're neglecting the teaching aspect and they're practicing it in their own life. And the one who at least teaches others, even if they're not practicing, they've only neglected one. They've only neglected one of the two obligations upon them, even though their state is not great and there's still punishment waiting for those who preach but don't practice. Go ahead.
Such a person may also say to himself, calling to God, exalted be He, and guiding His servants is a lofty degree and a noble rank that belongs to the leaders of guidance and religion and to their function. Neither am I one of those, nor am I qualified ever to be. His feelings of insignificance and inadequacy, his disdain of himself, and his humility then lead him to refrain from calling to God or assuming the function of guidance. His imagines this to be praiseworthy modesty, and that he thus knows his limits and humbly stops at them. Such thoughts are erroneous illusions, for the truth is never an obstacle to the truth, and good is never an obstacle to good. He should strive and do his utmost to call to guidance show the way to goodness, together with maintaining humility and modesty, experiencing fear and awe, confessing to his shortcomings, and disdaining himself. This is what perfection is, and how to acquire the attributes of those men who are not repulsed by the devil's insinuations, nor diverted by his illusions and deceptions, or his passing of evil as good.
The second type of person he's talking about, or the second misconception, is someone says, calling to Allah Ta'ala, participating in da'wah, teaching others is a lofty rank, a lofty station, and it's not becoming of me. So there's someone who's thinking, they think they have humility by admitting that this lofty rank is there, and they're not worthy to take up this mantle. Okay, this is also a misconception and delusion. Why is that? Is because, there is humility which is positive. Okay, humility which is positive, which is someone, for example, admits and knows that there's someone who Allah Ta'ala has blessed with things they're not worthy of. There's someone who's dependent upon Allah Ta'ala's mercy and blessings. There's someone, for example, that knows their own limits and their own transgressions, and they don't hold anyone else, the believers. They don't hold themselves over any other believers in terms of rank or status. They see everyone else as better than them. That's positive humility, right? But this kind of humility that prevents you from doing good is not actually a good humility. It's bad humility. Okay? So he thinks, well, this is calling to Allah Ta'ala. It's a lofty rank. It's a big thing. It's a noble, it's noble work that I'm not worthy of. So he's saying, I'm not going to do it. Well, what he thinks is humility is preventing him from doing good. It's not a good form of humility. It's not a good form of humility. It's a bad form of humility. He should participate in da'wah and calling to Allah Ta'ala, and still view himself as someone who is, not worthy of this rank in this work. Okay, if we think about it, the pious and the scholars, our shuyukh that we studied with, the shuyukh that you all have spent time with, the companions, the tabi'in, all of them, they were people of great humility. They were people of great humility. So Umar ibn al-Khattab said that. He said that if I heard that everyone will enter paradise except for one person, I would be afraid to be that one person. He said that if I heard that everyone will enter the fire except for one person, I'd hope to be that one person. And this is Umar ibn al-Khattab, one of the 10 people who was promised paradise in the hadith, the second Khalifa of the Prophet ﷺ, a great companion. And he had that kind of humility where he's saying, after being promised paradise, he's saying that if I heard that everyone will enter paradise except for one person, I'd be afraid I'm him. Okay, look how humble he was. And yet he still participated in calling to Allah Ta'ala and teaching others the religion of Islam. So what does that tell you? Is that the people of the great callers to Allah Ta'ala, the great scholars and the companions and those who came after them and followed in their footsteps, they were people of massive humility. Okay, none of them saw themselves as worthy to don this mantle, take up this mantle, and to call to Allah Ta'ala. They just did it because they had to. They did it because they had to. They did it because it's virtuous. They did it because it's a sunnah, and they still held themselves. They still humbled themselves before their Lord. Okay, they still humbled themselves before their Lord. So what someone should do is work in the da'wah, but still be humble. And recognize that, this is a blessing from Allah Ta'ala to be able to participate in this specific sunnah, and that through him is all success, and they shouldn't hold themselves higher than any other of the believers. But to let your so-called humility stop you from participating in the da'wah or anything else that is good, that's actually a negative form of humility that should be fought. Go ahead.
Another such illusion is for the scholar to spend all his time in his invocations and continuous acts of worship and recitation, feelings that is better for him and takes priority over calling to God and his path and disseminating profitable religious knowledge. The truth is that calling to God and disseminating profitable knowledge, when accompanied by sincerity are better than supererogatory prayers, and other devotions, for the benefits of knowledge are widespread, and it is indeed by both the common people and the elect, the young and the old. The hadith says the supererogatory of the scholar over the worshipper is as many supererogatory over the least among you. Superiority. Another hadith says the superiority of the scholar over the worshipper is as the superiority of the moon on the night when it is full over the rest of the planets. Nevertheless, the scholar who calls to God should never abandon his awrad and neglect acts of devotions, but he should designate times that are set aside for them when he can devote himself completely to worship, especially at night and those times of the day when he is not actively teaching or when no seekers of knowledge are usually present. Imam Malik, may God have mercy on him, said, "Seek this knowledge in a man near that does not affect your acts of worship, and pursue this worship in manner that does not affect the quest for knowledge." Imam Shafi'i, may God the Exalted have mercy on him, used to divide the night into three parts: one to pray, a second to study, and a third to sleep. The proof of Islam, may God the Exalted have mercy on him, in the section of the Ihya, when he discourses on how to arrange one's awrad, explains in detail how a scholar should schedule his time. So let every scholar hold on fast to that and implement it, and may God guide him.
So he's saying now that the third delusion or misconception that can affect a scholar or a student of knowledge is if they say, for example, they think to themselves, well, I'm really busy with, doing, personal adhkar or awrad, or, I'm busy with my personal worship. I don't have time to call to Allah Ta'ala. Okay, there's only 24 hours in a day. MashaAllah, I'm really busy doing all these things. There's no other time for me to go and teach or call to Allah Ta'ala. And this is a misconception as well. Why is it a misconception? Tamam? For multiple reasons. The first one is that when you do your personal adhkar, the only person you're helping is yourself, right? Someone can stay and pray a lot of salah, qiyam al-layl, tahajjud, do a lot of adhkar. At the end of the day, the person they're helping is themselves, right? You're going to do something and you're getting some reward for it from Allah Ta'ala. But when you call to Allah Ta'ala and you teach people, you're helping how many people? You're helping not just yourself, you're helping others. So the benefit, right? The benefit spills over to other individuals. So because the benefit, right, it helps more than just yourself, calling to Allah Ta'ala should be given a higher priority than one's personal adhkar, okay, and awrad. Now that doesn't mean that one should ditch their personal adhkar or awrad. That's not what we're saying, right? You should make time for everything. You should make time for your personal awrad, your personal adhkar, your personal worship. You should make time for calling to Allah Ta'ala as well. Okay? But recognizing that one of these acts, which is the da'wah of Allah Ta'ala, has helps multiple people, not just yourself, should give you an idea that it's worth making time for. Now, when we study the lives of the scholars of the past, we find that they managed to find time for everything. Okay? Imam Malik, look what he says in this. He says that you seek knowledge in a way that doesn't harm your worship, and worship in a way that doesn't harm your knowledge. Okay, that doesn't harm your seeking of knowledge. And that really summarizes it right there. Imam Shafi'i, a great Imam, who was a great caller to Allah Ta'ala, he was one of the pious and the awliya. He was someone who, like we studied earlier in this book, that he revived the religion for his century, and he wrote many books and he trained many students, and he was someone who built a whole madhab. This is Imam Shafi'i. He used to do 2 khatams of the Quran every single day. So with all of the books he was writing, all of the lessons he was teaching, all of his personal, everything he was busy with in terms of spreading knowledge and teaching the ummah, On top of all that, he was doing 2 khatams of the Quran every single day. All right. Like, how does that work? It just shows you have to learn how to structure your time and your day in order to make the most of it, okay? And not sacrifice da'wah for your personal worship and adhkar and awrad, but also not focus so much on da'wah that you neglect your own personal awrad and adhkar and worship, okay? So structuring your day is important in managing that, and he mentions that the structuring of one's time is important, and many scholars who spoke about it. Amongst them are Ghazali and Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of the religious sciences. And to summarize it, basically, every single moment of your life, okay, has something that is most appropriate for that time. All right, every single moment of your life has something that is most appropriate for that time. So, for example, right, if you're at a time in the day where you see, like, there are people who are willing to learn, right, and they're free, okay, and they're here, right, ready to learn. Now is the best time to teach. Now is the best time to teach. So, for example, like, in the United States of America here, people usually go to work or at school from like 9 to 5, right? In the afternoon, in the evening, a lot of people are free. They'll come to the Al-Rahma, they'll come to the masjid, they're ready to learn, ready to benefit in some way, shape, or form. That's a good time too. That's a good time too to teach, to benefit people, right? And then there are times of the day where that might not be the case. Okay, that might not be the case. People are busy with school, with work, with family. Okay, you find yourself, sitting and there's no one around you. Okay, that's the time where it's most appropriate to busy yourself with your own personal awrad and adhkar and ibadah. So recognizing how each time of your day has something most appropriate for it. When it's times that are most appropriate or best for calling to Allah Ta'ala because people are available and around you, that's the time you should take advantage of to call to Allah Ta'ala. And if there are other times during the day that are otherwise, right, where other people are busy, okay, or there's no one around, plus those are the times that you busy yourself with doing your adhkar, doing your awrad, and doing your personal worship. And a lot of those times for your personal worship will be like, at night or like early morning, at night and early morning when people are, they've gone to bed or they're still asleep or they're busy, with other things, and you just have the privacy. You're by yourself with Allah Ta'ala, and it's time for you that you can take advantage of for your personal awrad and adhkar. So everything he's mentioned now so far, okay, are misconceptions that afflict students of knowledge and scholars, okay, that are on the truth and are not people who are just, who have adorned themselves with scholarship but are actually chasing the dunya. Now he's going to talk about delusions that afflict people, scholars or students of knowledge who are chasing the dunya. Go ahead.
These illusions that we have mentioned and others like them may occur to some practicing scholars who are God-fearing and humble. As for those that occur to the pretenders who have realized neither fear of God nor humility and are not keen to practice what they know. They are numerous, but they all originate in distraction and confusion and prevent them from calling to the path of God and disseminating knowledge for God's sake. They are prevented from doing so by being too preoccupied with their worldly affairs, seeking the good graces of the evil, eminent people of this world, and refraining from criticizing them by procrastinating and delaying functions from their Pacific time so that they impinge on other things, or by the desire to keep their behavior and their negligence hidden, imagining that were they to call to God and the hereafter while their behavior is different from their words, the people will notice and they will be despised and lose their influence. This they dread, being most anxious to preserve their influence and rank in people's hearts, since they assiduously assiduously pursue eminence, for it is one of the most powerful worldly passions, and the one whose grip is most powerful over those egos that are prisoners of their passions. There are also among those who pretend to be scholars, though
Yeah,
who are
that's good. So he says now that the first misconception, or the root of many of the misconceptions or delusions that afflict the people who are, which you can say, scholars for dollars, okay? Scholars that, people who are students of knowledge, or scholars that are doing it for the sake of the dunya, okay, not for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. These people, they have many reasons for leaving the da'wah. The primary of which returns to their fear that if they were to call to Allah Ta'ala, they would lose the station and rank they have with the people around them. So these are people that they've sought knowledge, they've learned a little bit maybe, right? And they don't call to Allah Ta'ala, but people hold them in great esteem, right? They respect them, right? They cherish them, they hold them really lofty. They do everything, they hold them as role models, okay? But these people don't call to Allah Ta'ala. Why? Because there's a concern in their heart. They're worried that if they were to actually call to Allah Ta'ala and teach people the religion of Islam properly, what's going to happen? They're going to learn their religion, and they're going to look at these scholars and be like, wait a second, you're not doing what you're telling us, right? You're telling us one thing, and we don't observe that in you. So what's going to happen? They're going to lose their influence on these people. They're going to lose their love. They're going to lose their loyalty. They're going to lose, the status that they have amongst them, okay? And so because of that fear, they'll refrain from teaching them anything. They'll keep them in ignorance, right? All because why? Because they want to maintain this, they want to maintain this status in the eyes of the people and not throw it away. And at least they think so. They don't want to throw it away for the sake of calling to Allah Ta'ala. And this is obviously, it's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous. Number one, they're sinful for, doing all this, seeking knowledge for other than the sake of Allah Ta'ala, right? Number two, they're neglecting the da'wah, which is also sinful, right? For someone who has learned. And number three, okay, they have a love of like status and popularity in their hearts, which is a sin of the heart. It's a disease of the heart, okay? So there are multiple issues wrong with them here, okay? For someone to love popularity amongst people so much that it prevents them from good is an illness of the heart. It's an illness of the heart. So what they have here is just like they're a mess, honestly. They're a mess, and they have to recognize that, khalas, like, okay, they're in this terrible position. They have to rectify these things one by one. Firstly, by removing their love of people, of status amongst people from their hearts, all right, so that they can go ahead and, call to Allah Ta'ala, and they should rectify their intention. So they're not doing all this for the sake of, the dunya, rather doing it for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. Go ahead.
These are also among those who pretend to be scholars, those who are engaged in acquiring knowledge that is unrelated to the calling to God and His path, and reminding of Him, His days, His blessings, and His promises and threats. Yet they consider themselves scholars and consider those that differ from them ignorant. Examples of those are those whose knowledge consists of the subtitles, the subtleties of kalam, the rarely applicable branches of jurisprudence,
Yeah.
and legal ruling thereof. Another kind of those whose knowledge consists in grammar, linguistics, and literature. These are similar sciences, are not sciences of calling to God and His path, neither do they instill the fear of meeting Him, nor are concerned with His threats and His promises, nor do they warn against neglecting His injunctions and committing what He has forbidden, although they are considered scenes among the scenes, but they are beneficial neither to the common nor the elect. Neither are they what the people need for the good of their religion and the hereafter. It has been said, seeing sciences are numerous, and not all of them are beneficial. Sciences are like foods and medicines. Some are important and beneficial to everyone. Some are for certain people, but not others, and some are harmful to certain people, but not to others. He whose knowledge belongs to these sciences that are neither re- religiously important nor beneficial, to call him a scholar is an appellation, an appellation empty of content. His knowledge may even cause him to incur his Lord's wrath, to perish by losing his life to come. Thus, all scholars should add to these the religious sciences of the hereafter that are accompanied by fear and awe, abundant knowledge of the promises and threats and exhortations to detach oneself from the love of this world and desire the hereafter. For these are the scenes or the sciences about which Sufyan al-Thawri,
Thawri.
may God have mercy on him, said, "We sought knowledge for other than God's sake, but knowledge refused to be but for God's sake." The proof of Islam, may God have mercy on him, made similar statements.
So now he's saying that the final, or one of the other misconceptions that afflicts people who are scholars for the dunya, not for the afterlife, is that they busy themselves with forms of knowledge that ultimately are not beneficial for their afterlife. So we spoke earlier in the book about what's considered beneficial knowledge. It's knowledge, we said, that helps someone in their relationship with Allah Ta'ala. It helps them prepare for the next life. It reveals to them a fault in themselves they can correct, right, to better their relationship with Allah Ta'ala and their maqam or their status in the next life. Now, there are forms of knowledge that are not considered beneficial for one's afterlife. Okay? We're talking about forms of knowledge that aren't considered beneficial for the masses or for one's relationship with Allah Ta'ala. These are generally forms like things that are extremely particular or minute and not applicable to the masses. Okay? So, for example, he gives examples in the book. He says, for example, very rare things in the science of fiqh. Okay, so in fiqh, when we study fiqh, for example, we study how to make wudu, how to make ghusl, how to pray, how to give zakah, how to make hajj, how to sell and buy, how to, how one should get married, and other things, right? What's considered halal to you, what's considered haram to you, and things like that. Now, there are things that sometimes show up in fiqh, right? There are certain issues that show up in fiqh that are, extremely rare or even perhaps impossible, okay? Or even perhaps impossible, that, one could spend a lot of their time studying and the benefit of which is negligible. So, for example, okay, it's well known that, things that we get from the ocean are halal to eat, like fish, okay, in their various shapes and forms. You can eat them, they're halal. But then someone goes and says, well, what happens if you find a human being, like a fish in the shape of a human being that looks like a human being? Can you eat it or not? Or a fish in the shape of a dog, or a fish in the shape of a pig, basically just really, really obscure and minute, obscure or rare instances or occurrences in fiqh that if you know it or don't know it, it doesn't really change your life. How often are you going to find an animal in the ocean that looks like a human being? Okay? Or someone, for example, right? Someone, for example, they become consumed with, how do you make wudu if you have two heads? How do you make wudu if you have, like a tree growing out of your head? These are things that talk about in the fiqh books, right? A lot of them are very hypothetical, that if it were to occur, you would do this, right? And perhaps some of it, there is benefit to it. Like you might find one day someone who has two heads, they have to know this ruling, right? But for people to consume all their time with learning these very obscure facts and rulings, it would be considered, a waste of time. Especially if it's going to prevent them from calling to Allah Ta'ala and participating in da'wah. Because most people don't need these obscure rulings, okay? So similarly, whether it's in fiqh or whether it's, in language, in Arabic language, sometimes there are very, very obscure things you can study in Arabic language that don't really occur that often. They don't occur that often. Or there are very, very obscure things you can study in the knowledge of Tawheed or Kalam, like arguments, people make, or hypothetical scenarios, whether it's the prophets or Allah Ta'ala or the unseen. All these things, ultimately, they're not considered beneficial knowledge. Okay? Now, those fields of science like fiqh and Arabic and Tawheed or Kalam, many parts of it are beneficial. Like we all have to learn our fiqh, right? We can't survive day to day without fiqh. We can't survive, we can't understand the Quran and the Hadith without Arabic. We can't have a proper conceptualization of Allah Ta'ala and His messengers and the unseen without the science of Tawheed. So these things are important, but just certain parts of it, okay, certain aspects of this field have obscure, information that is obscure and information that is not necessary for someone to have a positive relationship with Allah Ta'ala. They're just there in the books they're archived in the books purely for academic reasons. And if you were to live your entire life, okay, you probably won't ever have to know that information. Now, if someone goes to consumes all their time just focusing on that small 1 or 2% that's considered unnecessary and neglects all the unnecessary parts of those fields and calling to Allah Ta'ala, they've wasted their time. Okay? They've wasted time. A metaphor you can think of is that if someone, for example, they weight train. They want to, they train with weights, they go to the gym, right? So instead of working out the muscles, right, that you need, either to have functional strength in your day-to-day life or in your athletics or sports or whatever, right? Instead of working out those muscles like, their biceps, right, their lats, okay, their abs, their glutes and everything like that, all right? Instead of doing those exercises, what do they exercise? They exercise muscles that no one's ever going to use. Like they work out their toes, for example, okay? They're just going to exercise their toes, all right? Or something, some other obscure muscle that no one's ever going to use for anything that's, practical. It's something that, people don't isolate and work out. And they work out on it so much they neglect all the other important muscle groups that you actually use, routinely. It's like that, okay? They've busied themselves with something that is trivial or not as important, over something that is extremely important, over something that is extremely important. So there is knowledge that is beneficial to your afterlife, and knowledge that is not. And someone who spends all their time busying themselves with this knowledge that is not beneficial to the afterlife, the author even says, do you even call that person a scholar? All they know are very obscure facts without knowing, for example, the meat and potatoes of the religion of Islam. And he says that information is like food, right? There's food that everyone has to eat. There's food that, you just have sometimes, and there's food that no one should be eating, right? So there's knowledge that everyone must have, right? So everyone must know about Allah Ta'ala and the prophets. Everyone must know, their fiqh. Everyone must know, about the Prophet Sallallahu and his seerah, right? It's like your meat and potatoes, okay? Everyone has to have, rice, bread, meat, potatoes, right? And then there's knowledge that some people need to know, okay? Some people need to know every now and then. And this is like, like medicine. You don't have to always have medicine, right? You just have medicine when you're sick, right? You have medicine when you're sick. And then you have knowledge that, that no one needs to know. And this is like food that no one should be eating, right? No one should be eating into the junk food, bad for your health, or it can be very harmful for you, almost like a poison, right? That can ultimately ruin your health and cause you to potentially die, okay, or spiritually die. So he says here, he ends this section. He says that Sufyan al-Thawri said, "We sought knowledge for other than Allah Ta'ala, and knowledge refused to be sought for other than Allah Ta'ala." So what he's saying is that people sought knowledge, okay, that was considered, not important or not beneficial to their next life. And then what happened was that, Allah diverted them back to, He guided them back to what is important for their afterlife. What is important for their afterlife, the knowledge that is beneficial and important for calling others to Allah Ta'ala and having a positive relationship with Allah Ta'ala. Keep reading.
Just as the pious, no less than the confused scholars, may be subject to doubts and illusions that hinder and obstruct him from calling to God, guiding to good and disseminating knowledge, so can the ignorant be subject to illusions that prevent him from seeking knowledge and acquiring insight into his religion. For instance, he may imagine that should he seek knowledge and acquire it, he will acquire with it obligations toward God and people, which he will be forced to discharge, and who he will then have been forced to conform to God's orders and prohibitions. In his ignorance, he thinks that to have knowledge is to be relieved from discharging these obligations. That thinking is erroneous and the excuse unacceptable. It may even happen that you observe one of those ignoramus refraining from attending the sessions of the people of truth for fear of hurting something of the promises of reward and threats of punishment, or something that may oblige him to conform to the obedience of God, avoid sins, or detach himself from the world and the pleasures that have taken him over and grasp him by the throat. He thinks that in this manner he will evade responsibility and he will not be required to conform to something he does not know. How wrong he is. God will never excuse him, and such behavior will only severe to increase him in remoteness, pain, abasement, and torment.
So he mentioned the misconceptions or delusions that can affect a scholar or a student of knowledge that is is sought his knowledge for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. He mentioned delusions and misconceptions for people who are scholars or students of knowledge who were doing it for the dunya. Okay? And now he's mentioning the misconceptions and delusions that can afflict just the general people who are not scholars or students of knowledge. These misconceptions can stop them from seeking knowledge altogether or learning their religion altogether. The first one, and the primary one, is quite common, which is that someone thinks that, you know what, if I go learn religion, if I go learn Islam, if I go, spend time with scholars and students of knowledge and go to their gatherings, what's going to happen? I'm going to learn about this religion and have to actually start practicing it, right? If I learn about it, halas, I got to start practicing it, and then I have no excuses, okay? But if I don't go, I'm not going to learn about it. I don't have to do it, okay? I don't have to do it. Can't be forced to do something that you don't even know you have to do, right? That's the way they think. Well, that's completely ridiculous, right? Because their negligence in learning their religion doesn't mean Allah Ta'ala doesn't hold them accountable, okay? Allah Ta'ala commands everyone to seek knowledge, right? The Prophet said in the hadith, he said that seeking knowledge is obligatory upon every believer, meaning that every single believer has to learn some of their religion that they need for their day-to-day life, right? For their day-to-day life. And these people are neglecting that. They think that, khalas, if I don't learn it, I don't have to practice it, right? But just because they're neglecting to learn it doesn't mean that they're not sinful for not learning it. Okay? So they're sinful for neglecting to learn, and they're sinful for not practicing. There's two sins here, right? And them ignoring the fact they have to learn doesn't mean that Allah won't hold them accountable. They're no different than, for example, an ostrich. When it gets scared and sees danger, it sticks its head in the ground in a hole. Okay? And it thinks, khalas, it thinks like if I can't see the danger, it can't see me, I'm safe. It's like a little kid when you play hide and seek with a little kid, right? The little kid will think that, if they can't see you, you can't see them. Even like a baby, right? A really small child, if you play hide and seek with them, they'll just cover their head with something, right? Or they'll go somewhere and hide where they can't see you, but maybe their legs are sticking out or their arms are sticking out, and they think they're safe. All right, so they think that if they can't see danger, the danger won't reach them. That's erroneous. That's ridiculous, right? And similarly, these people, they think that if I don't learn the religion, then I won't be held accountable. That's not true. We're accountable to learn and to practice. Okay, we're accountable to learn and to practice. Okay, keep reading.
The ignorant person may be prevented from seeking the truth and learning about religion by his relentless pursuit of this world, by being infatuated with its beauties and preoccupied with gathering its debris to the extent that no time is left for the truth and religion. His share will be this world. It will consist in remaining constantly engaged in gathering and withholding it and enjoying its pleasures and appetites. Religion and the hereafter, he will thus have no share at all. Yet he is so thoroughly ignorant and so utterly distracted that he imagines that working for this world is more important and more pressing and takes precedence over seeking to learn his religion and God's commands and prohibitions. About such people, God exalted be He says, they know some appearances of this life, of this world, but of the hereafter they are heedless. And He says, exalted be He, they are content with the life of this world and are reassured by it. Those who are heedless of our signs, their abode will be the fire for that they have earned. In reality, engaging in learning religion, becoming familiar with knowledge, and fulfilling God's rights as far as both knowledge and works are concerned, is the basis, a foundation upon which all else rest. As for worldly matters, they are all secondary compared with this, and by this I mean essential worldly matters. As for in essential ones, Muslims are discouraged from attending to them and encouraged to abandon them. See how the ignorant and heedless turn things upside down because of their ignorance, making the head tail and the tail head, the essential secondary and the secondary essential, and showing interest in that which should be renounced and disinterest in that which should be sought. And you will see how the ignorant and harmful and evil news and affliction and humiliation for those families in this world and the next. This is why it was said, his enemies never endure the ignorant more than the ignorant endures himself. And ignorance for the ignorant is a death before death. His body is a tomb long before he is laid in his tomb.
So he's saying as well that a misconception that can affect some people, some of the masses, some of the general lay people, is that they'll think that it's more important for them to be busy with dunya than to be busy with deen. Okay? It's more important for them to be busy with dunya than to be busy with deen. What this means is that it could be they've mismanaged their priorities. They think, for example, I'm busy, I have to work, provide for my family, put food on the table, save up for their college or these expenses, whatever it might be, right? So either they have mismanaged their priorities and they think that, part of the dunya they have to chase or they have to acquire is more important than their religion, or they're completely submerged in dunya to a point where like all their priorities are out of whack. Okay, so for example, they'll have such love of the dunya, they're just chasing completely and they neglect the deen. Okay, even the parts of the dunya they're chasing are just things that are, prohibited. Okay, prohibited and haram, for example. Okay, beyond just what you need, beyond the halal they need to provide for themselves and their family. So these people have these misconceptions, and they think that it's an excuse for them from learning their religion. It's an excuse for them from learning their religion, and it's completely wrong, right? Like we mentioned earlier, the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, right, that every Muslim has to seek knowledge, meaning that every single Muslim has to seek, right, what they need to know from their religion to practice their day-to-day life, to practice their Islam daily, and to have a good relationship with Allah Ta'ala, and to enter paradise. Okay, but these people, okay, they don't recognize that. They don't recognize that learning your religion is the most important thing in your life. And after that, seek from the dunya what you need to provide for yourself and your family, and definitely don't seek from the dunya that which is haram. But what they've done now is they're so busy seeking from the dunya, okay, whether it's the halal from their family, right, they've neglected learning their religion. Or, na'udhu billah, they're so caught up in the dunya, they've begun to even seek the haram. And that's just going to lead to their destruction. And all of their behavior there is because of their ignorance in these matters. Is there anything left in this section?
Hmm.
You finished
Oh.
it?
I don't know if it's part.
It's poetry. It's just 2 lines of poetry. Oh, yeah, you do it too.
I did this. That's that.
I mean, it's not basically that. No.
No.
Yeah, there's 2 paragraphs.
2 paragraphs. We'll stop there. Tomorrow, inshallah, we'll resume. Okay? So I'm with the fact that Allah give us tawfiq, seek beneficial knowledge, spread all over the world, practice it, and accepts that from us. Makes the Prophet happy with us. He rewards our teachers, our shuyukh, and all those that participate in us with our Hadrat al-Nabi.